Now, I wanted to get back into making art, so for this two-part series, instead of looking at my face, you're going to be watching me test out techniques and creating pieces for our home. You ain't going to see a masterpiece. You'll see failure and me redoing things and still never being happy because that's the perfectionist in me. But it's the new year and I want to encourage people to take up hobbies that bring them joy, even if they aren't amazing at them. Now, I read a big old bunch of think pieces for this, but as per usual, a lot of it is from the world of academia. So I'm going to share some of it, but in an approachable way because I like things to be accessible. The art world is full of people who want to keep it aloof and above the reach of everyone, and most of those people want to keep it that way are indeed super rich themselves, and I'm not here for that. Understanding motives behind art, seeing the broader connotations and links, yes. I also believe that more counts as art than people think. I've seen a lot of gatekeepy pieces about the concept of what makes art art.
Art isn't art until someone says it is. It's art.
The right people?
Derivative. That I love. I absolutely love.
That's just the air conditioner.
I want it. It's everything.
It's an endless spiral of posturing and prescribing meaning and how beautiful things can't be art as they're just aesthetic and blah 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 blah. This video is not about what is art, but it's about how capitalism has shaped it. This is my unqualified opinion based on observations from multiple places. Nobody's opinion is a be-all and end-all in my books anyway. I just like going on these learning journeys with you and hopefully expanding both of our perspectives. So why do we create art? Talk about something that requires a whole video in itself. The notion can be boiled down to a few things in my opinion. We've always had a desire to express ourselves, to share messages, stories, history, meaning, cultural significance and importance, from cave paintings to paintings depicting mythology, to the realities and propaganda of war. Art comes in many forms, from dance to paint to makeup to music to graffiti to film and more. It's subjective, intriguing, and sometimes shocking. It's artists creating a narrative for themselves or for others, a form of expression. It could be summed up by another word, to me at least, and that's connection. Through creative outlets we can connect with others, especially when we're quite alienated when you think about it. And this of course links into another video I want to make on hyper-individualism and the loss of community, but that's down the track if you want it. Art theoretically should be able to bridge all gaps, but in many instances, historically, it's been kept locked away by the rich. It's been the controlling factor in messages to the masses, us poors not being able to relish in its beauty and storytelling unless we go to a specific place, or even not at all because it's been kept locked up. And that's why people like Banksy's work is so fascinating. I mean, street art is an equalizer, but is it still an equalizer if it's paid for by the owning class? Can art be genuine if it's a job? Can art show reality when it's commissioned? Ooh, we're going on a journey, baby!
What you currently have in your mouth is art!
Intrinsically, measurably, art has no value, but that doesn't work with capitalism. There has to be a measure of value and worth, and because art is subjective, it's created a market whereby the measure of worth comes down to art appraisers, art is being viewed like brand recognition, and many steps of verification to ensure that the investment is properly protected and insured, so that when the rich person donates it to a museum, they can get a nice big tax write-off, even if that price is overinflated, since it works better for the rich person to do that.
Here, just give me $20 worth of art. Just something that seems personal that only I could have done.
Well, tell me about yourself.
No, just paint.
How do you ensure respect and notoriety when you can't tweet your ego into existence? How do you let other nations know how grand you are and why they should do trade with you? How do you advertise that your daughter is good for marriage? Why, my dear friend, through art. Now I'm skimming over things here, but art has been used as a marketing tool for centuries. It's not a lie to say that. Paying for creations to skew perceptions instead of just being able to create art for art's sake has been around for centuries. The Catholic Church really did it to him back in the day with things like the Sistine Chapel, which was actually paid for by taxing the people. But, even before then, it was part of forming how Christianity took over Europe, along with some other things. It was advertising via commissioned works by the church, and also the rich paid for commissioned work in order to pay penance for usury, which is money lending at interest, which was condemned by the church but inherent to their profession. It's kind of like buying a stairway to heaven. Again, this is something many people have written about over the years and requires an entire video, multiple in fact. It's something I'm not qualified to cover, nor do I want to. What I'm pointing at here is the fact that art has been dictated and directed by the wealthy for centuries now. The Renaissance truly was a time where art shifted drastically. Lots of course is thanks to the ruling class in Italy and some incredibly skilled artists. You may have heard of them.
Da Vinci?
Patronage was how the wealthy showed their wealth and bought respect. We're on about the 15th century here, sweetie. This is a tale as old as time that people have been doing this. What happened in the Renaissance was the view of the artist shifted from being a craftsman like a woodworker, as they were previously seen, to now being seen, according to art historian Richard Stemp. Gradually, people began to understand that artists were not just painters and decorators, but had a particularly gifted insight on the world. Artists began to earn respect and higher fees for their personal styles and innovative techniques. The big shift began in how artists were viewed, and honestly, I could go on for a day and an age about how the Medici family in Florence, you may have heard of this little thing called the Uffizi Gallery, which they had designed and built, which, we've indeed seen. Well, these incredibly wealthy patrons had themselves painted into many murals. They paid for chapels, all sorts. And going on to quote Stemp again, the vast majority of works in the Renaissance were created to communicate some sort of message. Sometimes that message was quite specifically about the power of the patrons. This is something which many rich people have done over the centuries. The Medici family is just a very famous example. Art was and still is being used as a flex to convey the message that the patron wants. None of this means that the artworks, buildings, and sculptures weren't good, but what is it that the artist wants to convey? It's been reduced to another job already. Whilst more pedestaled than in the past, they're still doing vanity projects, which do indeed look beautiful, but vanity projects are for the rich, nonetheless, not the artists themselves.
Phil, what's the point?
Royalty and the rich, it's advertising time, baby. Another way to earn your keep was to be a skilled portrait painter for the wealthy kings, queens, or the noble elite. Commissioning work, Heck, there was even one artwork painted which helped to end a war, and that's from commissioning. It requires a whole video, so let me know if you want info on this. Depardo Minsky said, commissioned portraits were popular among people with big enough egos to want to preserve themselves. As such is life these days with legacy. Also, this was used as a way to advertise their daughters before their suitor met them to marry them. Very romantic, art advertising. But royalty did this all the time. Here's some gems for you. They commissioned art in order to control and create the image they wanted of their leadership and of themselves. Gotta glorify and solidify your legacy. What better way than this? Also, this engraving of King Henry VIII, he never actually saw himself, but he wasn't really a GC, so I'm showing you anyway. He, in fact, requested multiple portraits of his potential brides anyway, wanting to ensure that they were indeed pretty enough for him. And I watched a very interesting video about it recently by Royalty Now Studios, which I'll link down below. King Louis XIV of France understood the political power of these portraits. From this article by Ranker, one of the king's most skilled propagandists was the court painter Charles Lebrun, who helped create the image of Louis as a strong, devout sun king. In Lebrun's equestrian portrait of Louis, the armor-clad king appears robust, majestic, and virile. In other words, he looks like someone capable of leading France to glory. Okay, that's a lot of old history I've been throwing at you. I just wanted to illustrate properly how this has been a growing issue for centuries, how art has been used by the rich to control narratives, opinions, ensure their positions of wealth and power. All of this is still done today in the various ways. Capitalism officially started in citation needed. No, really, the debate is huge about exactly when capitalism began. Like, truly, look at all these citation requests on Wikipedia. Depending on your view, it began at the Industrial Revolution, or it evolved from merchant capitalism in the Middle Ages, hence me painting things with such broad strokes in what I'm talking about here to give the context. So, if it was from the Industrial Revolution, what famous art movements sprung up because of disillusionment from the rise of machinery, reproduction of art, and industrialization? Well, a number of things. Romanticism, to realism, to impressionism, a return to nature of sorts, and also to handicrafts and the like of the arts and crafts movement, in retaliation to machinery replacing skilled workers via mass production. Oh, and we can't forget about Dada, right? The reaction to the First World War and challenging the definitions of art and absurdity of the art world. I will refer you to Philosophy Tube's video here in case you haven't seen it yet.
Go in a box, ladies, the newest form of mass-distributed art. Paint by numbers. Look at what we have done to the man who refused to conform his ideals to popular taste, who refused to compromise his integrity. We have put him in a tiny box and asked you to copy him.
Now, you know we gotta talk about our boy Van Gogh, however you want to pronounce it. I'm English, so I'm used to Van Gogh, who did impressionist paintings. Like, you may have seen his work. But famously, he wasn't exactly what we call a popular painter, wasn't really even an employed painter. He only sold one painting in his whole life, and it's this one. But after he passed away, his work became sought after, and he became a bit of a poster child for our tortured artist trope, whether he wanted to be or not. But we famously know that once an artist has passed, they become glorified, but not really. The idea of them does, and the ugliest selling off of their work happens. It's like vultures picking at a corpse for their own gain. As much as people may want to say that they love the work of an artist who is still alive, you know that when they pass, there's this little evil light bulb that goes, my asset just increased.
Welcome to my world.
The commodification of the artist. Now, over the years, the artist transformed into an outsider figure, a commentator on the world, and the bourgeoisie loved it. A reckless bohemian who struggles to sell work makes for a fantastic dinner guest to be trotted out. The artist became part of the art themselves, a persona of sorts, like Salvador Dali or quintessentially Andy Warhol, as was written about in this fantastic piece by It Starts With Amsterdam by Adam Geksky. He makes himself into a ready-made. I point to myself. I am the work of art. Just as important as the works themselves is that Andy Warhol did them. He was the ultimate signatory. The artist as a brand name. Warhol was the pioneer of art's entry into the sphere of mass market production and entertainment. He still stands out from his successors because of an inscrutably laconic temperament that lent an air of ironic indifference to everything he did. Artists have been written about at length, which is of course good to understand the creations that they made, and sometimes this really leans into glorifying behaviours that's actually abusive, but more on that in this video, which I got demonetized for because fun. But it's quite different when artists become a brand, and a challenging line that artists have to walk on. Banksy famously wants to remain anonymous, but how do you protect your IP, your creations, when people can steal your work and impersonate you? This is a topic which does require a whole video, but famously, a store was set up to sell his work without advertising who it was, all at a very affordable price of like $60 a piece, but only 4 pieces were bought throughout an entire day. He says, I know street art can feel increasingly like the marketing wing of an art career, so I wanted to make some art without the price tag attached. He makes commentary on war and the art world, but regardless of shredding and painting the moment it sells, people can't get enough of him, even the super rich. Even though his art is technically illegal in a lot of cases, it's part of his brand. Now, I also want to reiterate here, I've got nothing against Banksy, I'm more just illustrating the struggle that artists have. In order to succeed across all forms of art today, due to the commodification of art, all artists need to have a personal brand. Whether that's a music producer creating one or a DIY job, it's all part of the package now. As people accumulate things to reflect themselves through commodities, commodity fetishism you could say, they want those brands to reflect them. Hell, I mean, just look how nervous Taylor Swift was to talk about politics. Look what happened to the Dixie Chicks. There are countless more examples here too.
Jackie O had one just like it.
$140,000 up front now, $140,000.
corruption of the art world. Sell, sell, sell. Capitalism doesn't care about high or low art, it wants to sell. In 1674, the first auction house, Stockholm's Auktionsverk, opened its doors for business in Stockholm. In the 18th century, thanks to increased globalization and trade, the art market changed drastically with two auction houses showing up. You may have heard of them. Sotheby's in 1744 and Christie's in 1766, which so happen to be the two biggest auction houses in the world still. Now, if you want a fantastic video about art auction house corruption, check out Wendover Productions' video, which is linked down below. I don't want to step on the toes of it, but suffice to say that auction houses, galleries, and the such are funded by generational wealth and money that hasn't exactly been gotten ethically. We'll be talking more about this in the next episode. Now, nor of many artifacts. I'm sure you'll all have seen John Oliver's videos on antiquities and museums by now, but with auction houses, art's prices and prestige morphed into a game for the rich after World War II especially. Bidding wars happened as the auction houses transformed themselves into glittering celebrity events as they expanded. Americans in particular wanted to snap up this work, and the telephone allowed that trade. As art moved on, it was contemporary art that was sought after. No longer the old greats, but game changers like Picasso, who we don't like, Van Gogh, Monet, Jackson Pollock, heck, we also can't forget Rothko. The pieces wanted were more striking in nature. You may say more simplistic, but art is valuable for all its differences in my books. These were statement pieces of wealth to display, not like old money with antiquities, but in-your-face big pieces. The rebrand of art houses to sellers of luxury goods was complete, and they wanted to keep it that way. You get the profit and the prestige that way, you see?
Nice. Do you know what it's worth? I just like my haystacks, Bobby.
Art galleries, fraud, and money laundering. Allegedly, everything is alleged. Please don't sue me. In the book, The Dialects of Art by John Molyneux, this quote is shared. As we know from Marx, in class societies, the ruling class dominates the culture, though seldom completely. However, the domination of the field of visual art, especially painting and sculpture, has been more complete, more extreme than in other art forms. This is because whereas the poet or the novelist need only pen and paper, the visual art must be embodied in materials, which are very expensive, sorted and exhibited either in museums or galleries or public galleries or in public places, which of course are never really controlled by the public. Which basically means that the ruling class, the mega-rich, the generational wealth and exploiters of the world decide what is art and what art is displayed and paid for, what art is deemed to be art and worthy of display, worthy of funding, and for people to see and enjoy the riches of to be gazed upon. The Getty, whose trust is $8 billion, were initiated not only out of the love of art, but because of the tax breaks it could achieve by operating as a public museum and trust. At the start of the millennium, it came to light that the Getty was involved in a series of scandals involving Grecian urns acquired under shady circumstances through the now discredited Italian dealer Giacomo Medici. Although they never dealt with Medici directly, it's now known that the Getty acquired fragments of the same urn at different times, which were then assembled. To make matters worse, in 1996, the prominent philanthropic couple, Barbara and Lawrence Fleischman, donated and sold to the Getty their collection of antiquities, which was actually bought on the Getty's behalf. Now, you know those sweet tax benefits from donations? This has been a problem for ages. Okay, there's this article from many years ago about this, the LA Times reporting in 2008. Yes, I love to remind everyone how old we're all getting. Each year, the Internal Revenue Service audits donations claimed on only a handful of the 100,000 or more tax returns that allow art donors to reap nearly $1 billion in tax write-offs. Half of the donations checked over the last 20 years have been appraised at nearly double their actual value. Not only that, but audits by the IRS have been reduced too, so those who donate art and use it as a tax write-off are potentially using this as a tax avoidance scheme. But of course, it's the lazy people who don't want to work who are the problem, right? Not Not that they're not paid a living wage or exploited by businesses, no. In 2004, the IRS appraisers checked only 7 of the 108,554 tax returns with donations of art. They found that more than a third of 184 objects claimed on those returns were overvalued, on average more than 3 times their true worth. So these people donating their art to galleries, who the galleries sing the praises of on plaques and in tours, they're actually doing it for their own personal benefit, with the galleries being in a bit of a tricky position of pandering to them in order to get these fantastic pieces to display. Plus, why would a gallery who can sell paintings want to go against their own favour, since they earn money on the sale as well? It makes sense for everyone in the art world to overinflate the prices and keep it that way. When the issue was raised that there's a giant loophole that needs to be closed, since the rules were written to actually benefit the poor, which these quote-unquote art donations do not, museums defend the loophole by saying, and I quote, "For more than a century, tax write-offs have been the economic engine that has built public art collections across the country. More than 80% of acquisitions now come through donations, according to the Association of Art Museum Directors. If something were to happen to the deductibility of art, it would be disastrous," said Anita Defanis, a lobbyist for the association. And we know lobbyists are always doing things for the right reasons, huh? Now, this article is from 2008, so I got a few more recent pieces. Let's go on a bit of a journey. Now, the Mexican government in 2012 put it into law that anonymous cash buyers of art were no longer allowed to do that, the whole anti-money laundering regulations. Sales of art actually dropped by nearly 30% in galleries, but other statistics read a 70% drop. Due to many untraceable private sales, because only at auctions do artworks need to have details of owners taken about them, it's easy to launder money with art. Say for example, you've got a cool $10 million. You buy Picasso, which sits at a Freeport, which is a storage unit near an airport. Then you sell it anonymously to someone else, and bada bing, bada boom, the washing's done, baby. There's many more complex ways of this, and lots of examples, like what's happened famously with this painting of Hannibal by Jean-Michel Basquiat. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. It was marked as being $100 when it was taken across the ocean on a plane, but it's actually worth $8 million, as a way to try and launder money by Edmir Cid Ferreira. Countries are trying to tackle this, but what makes the art world so appealing is how closed it is to anybody not in the know. And as I said before, when the benefits are being allegedly underhanded to help everyone in the business, why would they go against it? It would take too long to go into the many other cases, but you can see how this happens and how it's been upheld, since it makes everybody rich. I mean, are we even talking about art anymore at this point?
Next grade, next way.
Artist collaborations with luxury brands. Selling out is one of the worst things an artist can do, apparently. Understanding, of course, that we all have to live under capitalism, whether we want to or not. Using your passion to pay your way through life is good though, right? But what about when artists collaborate with brands who just want to use them for the quote aesthetic? And what happens when the artist doesn't care about the mass production, damage to the environment, the effects on the workers that make the items? Like, what then? Are they free of judgment? The worlds are literally colliding between art and the act of consumerism. They're no longer really separate. You too can own a piece. There's 2 particular examples I want to look at here, and there's still a lot of discourse around these exact examples. Firstly, let's look at Takashi Murakami, an incredibly famous artist for his iconic superflat look. There's articles by Vogue, Medium, and by various artists about this. To quote the Medium article, Takashi Murakami established his superflat aesthetic in theory as the merge of art with commercial forms of Japanese culture. Now, he collaborated with Louis Vuitton. You'll recall these if you're a millennial. I did love the look back then too. He worked with them for many years, from about 2003 to 2010, with his work being sold in stores until 2015. But whilst this was a huge commercial success, there's artists who take issue with it, and Takashi Murakami actually purposefully played into the quote kawaii tropes. He doesn't like how particularly the West have stereotypes about Japan. To quote the Medium article again, Murakami allows himself to make a cynical commentary on Western ignorance and attitudes towards Japan, while simultaneously exploiting millions out of such ideas through the people with those exact exact attitudes ignorantly buying his products. Yet the question regarding the success of this political commentary still remains, considering the West actually remain oblivious to his critiques. So you're leaning in on stereotypes and profiting off people, however still being part of spreading those same stereotypes. And none of the customers really know the true meaning or intention behind the collaboration. Now some see this as genius, others as selling out, as no explanation is given, nor is it obvious to the purchasers that it's actually a critique of them. The second one I want to talk about is Jeff Koons. Now you may recognize his art from the giant balloon animals. He actually collaborated with H&M of all places. Now, Koons has a lot of haters who are artists, but also good luck finding the super rich without at least one of his pieces proudly on display in their homes. But he was branded as the people's artist by H&M. He did a quote takeover in 2014, and the giant stores of commerce were plastered with what else but a decal of a giant gold dog balloon animal. He also made limited edition leather H&M handbags with the artwork on it. As H&M said, it's the ultimate art meets fashion statement from the ultimate post-pop artist. God. This moment from the New York Times fills me with absolute cynicism, titled Art and Handbags for the People. But in joining hands with H&M, Mr. Koons lent this time-tested marketing gambit a democratic twist. No longer the exclusive provenance of the luxury arena, such artist retail partnerships now have trickled downwards, with the aim, it seems, of lending fast fashion a whiff of class and cultural clout. Yes, exactly what the people need. A handbag with a balloon dog on it. Look, if you bought one and love it, I am happy for you, but all of this is really clout chasing. Whether it's for the artist or the people who buy the items, art has officially reached peak commodity status. I looked up the price of this affordable $50 bag now, and if, in case someone wants to buy it still, I found one on eBay for $275, and that's in US. For the people, huh? I mean, it's really about ownership as opposed to, appreciating artwork.
How's your father's project coming along? I think he's almost done. Yeah, he's done.
Final thoughts for this video. In my opinion, the art world is so allegedly I'm saying this a lot, corrupt. And that's what bothers me. Now look, I love art in all the forms it comes in, and I'm sure that you do too. I'm not one of these people to point at modern art and say, my 5-year-old could do that. I've got preferences, just like everybody else does, but that preference isn't based on how much money the work sells for. If anything, the gaudy amount actually turns me off it and makes it feel less genuine. I hope that going over these few things with you that you'll have gained some knowledge or something of interest, and also you'll probably be able to understand why I kept falling down rabbit holes, because honestly, this is beyond fascinating to me, and it explains why narrowing my scope didn't really narrow it all that much. But on most of these topics, I could do deeper dives on them if you want. Like I said, my next video on art and capitalism will be on current and future issues like AI, NFTs, art theft, art protests, aesthetic expectations, and how the commodified world has shaped what is even being introduced in the art churn which traps artists, affecting all kinds of art. Now, if you made it all the way to the end, thank you. This has actually taken me weeks and weeks to work on, so I'd appreciate it if you could like, share, comment down below, as it helps me out heaps. I'll be doing more paintings for around the house too, so expect to see those soonish in videos. I'm working my way up to a trilogy of big canvases, which I'm quite nervous about, but that's why we practice, right? Thank you all for watching, and of course, if you want further reading, check out my many sources below.
What is that?
You tell me.
All right, no. It's not good. In fact, I wouldn't even call it art. It's grotesque.